would you do the honors of doing our uh, German pledge?
Yes, it will be my pleasure. Als ein Bürger dieser Welt folge ich den Kreis des Lernens neugierig, ideenreich, respektvoll, kooperativ, mutig, empathisch.
Thank you. Okay. All right, Samantha.
Thank you. Now we'll go through a roll call. Yasir is not in attendance yet. Frank?
Here.
Pete?
Here.
Katrin?
Here.
And I am present as well. We have a quorum to continue. Next, we move to the affirmation of board findings pursuant to Government Code Section 54953, subsection E. Chris, do I read this out?
You don't need to read it through. It's just basically saying that we're determining this is a healthy and safe way to hold our meeting as doing it virtually.
Thank you. I'll move. Do I have a second?
I second.
That's Frank. I'll take a vote now. Frank?
Aye.
Pete?
Aye.
Katrin?
Yes.
And I also approve. I'd like to now make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thanks. That was Frank. Going to a vote. Frank?
Aye.
Pete?
Yes.
Katrin?
Yes.
Thank you. And I also approve. Now we move to public comment on general items in the board's jurisdiction. Chris, I will turn this over to you and your team.
Okay. Casey, you want to walk us through that?
The public may comment on any item that is on the agenda or any other item that is in the board's jurisdiction. Members of the public who wish to comment during the board meeting may use the raise hand tool on the Zoom platform. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and the total time for this purpose shall not exceed 30 minutes per meeting. If an interpreter is needed for comments, they will be translated to English, and the time limit shall be 6 minutes. Individuals may speak 1 time per subject. The Board of Trustees reserves the right to mute or remove a member of the public if comments or actions disrupt the board meeting. Board members are prohibited from responding to or commenting on matters raised by the public that are not on the agenda.
And do we have any members of the public who would like to speak?
Looks like there are no hands raised for public comment.
So we'll then move to items for discussion and action. We have 1 item here today. That's discussion of the budget for 2022 to 2023. I understand there's no motion on the table right now for this, Chris, so it's just for discussion.
Correct. So the
Chris,
board had expressed.
Can you?
Oh.
Yeah. I, as a finance chair, I just wanted to chime in, before Dr. Jones is going to go into his presentation, which I think looks like a good presentation. So again, we're not voting on anything. This is really a meeting to bring everybody along. What's interesting to me, what will be interesting to me is to see what the risk tolerance is of you guys here, like on the board. Because in the finance committee, we kind of challenged ourselves to go through, to use the mandate of the board, which has said invest into the program, right? But the board hasn't said what investment means and what investment could look like. So Dr. Jones has prepared a couple of scenarios here, or 2 scenarios actually, which just none of them are, they are likely in one shape or the other, have different likelihood, but they give the space under which they determine the framework, right? The truth is between or above or below, but I think they give a space and it allows us to determine what is our risk tolerance. So these were my initial comments, Dr. Jones. I apologize for hijacking your initial your comment because we haven't talked about it before, but I thought it was my observation of our finance committee meeting.
Absolutely, and this came from the finance committee, and we had a long discussion on Monday with regard to that in preparation. So the board had previously asked to just have a meeting separate from the regular meeting so that they could focus on budget without all the other things that go on in a board meeting. So thank you for meeting. We'll try to keep this meeting today to about 60 minutes. It should not be, it shouldn't be that lengthy. And one of the reasons for that is, and I'll be going into detail on this, is that the budget is still not fully baked at the state level. The May revision was given, but school services, who does the interpretation of all the rules and how you build the macros and how you build all the pieces to that, they are it still has not been formalized into what we can put into the budget in terms of showing all the income. So I'll talk about this in the presentation. And I don't know, Biggie, I just want to be sure if you could send to Ryan the link.
I already did. He had an emergency and got stuck in traffic at the moment. He's trying to get back as soon as possible and then join, but at the moment
okay.
He's not able to.
Yeah, we can move forward even if he's not here. I just wanted to be sure that he had the link. I hope that goes well. So I'm going to share at this time let's start from beginning. All right. We're going to look at the 22-23 budget and where it stands as of today, keeping in mind that we're not approving this budget until June 23rd, and a lot can and will happen at the legislative level between now and then. We hope that by that time the legislature has actually finalized their budget. They are supposed to have done that by the 15th, but that doesn't always happen. That way. But we should have a definite sense of where they are at by that point. But the goals that we had been trying to meet in this budget resulted from conversations that board members have had, specifically about growth, and that we think that that's the lifeline of the school and that we need to plan for growth. And the place that we looked to grow was first kind of filling in some of the grade levels that had dropped in enrollment a little bit. And seeing if those can be beefed up as well. But the two major areas of growth and enrollment are TK kindergarten and at 6th grade. And so that is reflected in the assumptions and enrollment projections that are built within. We also wanted to maintain and expand the investment in our MYP exploratory and language. So as we're growing, we need to grow those programs for exploratory and grow them for language. And so that is something that we wanted to do. We wanted to maintain our classified support staff. I know that that's been something that comes up every year of, are we cutting instructional aides? We did not want to do that. So that was a goal. Are we continuing our special programs for PYP? So as we've expanded in the MYP, not leaving the PYP behind. And that has been an issue over many years of will those continue, will they not continue? And we wanted to be sure that that was a goal. An investment in professional development. This came up many times from the board, particularly in our March discussions. And also maintaining and providing intervention support for our neediest and most struggling students. So that's what we went into this with a mindset. And we had been waiting on the governor's May revision. And although it's hundreds of pages and then a trailer bill with hundreds and hundreds of more pages, that's literally still being interpreted and adjusted. There's a couple major points of it. And the first one is kind of the hard and fast one that was easy to calculate. And that was that the cost of living went up from 5.3 to 6.5. That's a very significant jump of over a percentage. And that was something we were able to calculate into the budget, and in the budget we're going to look at later, that is in there. It's baked in. And so that is a really important piece. But there were two other major pieces. I mean, there's lots of different things, but the two other major pieces that affect us here at Goethe is that there is additional ongoing funding that the governor recommended that's beyond that 6.5. And so he was recommending that we spend up to 10%. And so we put that the delta in there. So the balance of 3.5% that has the potential of being put into this budget. It is not going to be in our model, and I'll talk about that yet. And then one-time funding is also, and it's a very hefty amount that could be up to. So it says 1,300 per ADA. Now that is not a set in stone amount, and this is going to be what they're really, I think, hashing out at the legislative level. But you know, that's a big chunk of money that would greatly affect us, allow us to do some things one time, and we'll talk about what we might do with that later in the presentation. So what is included in this budget? We are funding a program with 17 classrooms and the teachers for that. And then beyond the basics of what we normally do, we have some things that are included. A part-time on-campus intervention teacher that we've been doing for really the second half of the year. We want to continue with that. We think that's been the most effective piece that we've added of all the different intervention pieces, and so that is something that is in this budget. We made sure field trips were in the budget. They were out before, and we had solely relied on fundraising. Now we're going to have one per grade level, and we will also ask for potential fundraising to maybe add a second field trip at a grade level. But that the one per grade level is in there. The fact that we have 8 instructional aides and 2 BIIs built into this budget means that it'll actually bring us beyond the level we're at, because we have an unfilled position. So we are that is something that is in this budget. Our PYP specials, so Spanish and PE and art, that programs that serve our TK through 5th grade program. We wanted to be sure that that was in there, and the MYP exploratories, the fine and performing arts, design and robotics, coding that we've done through some outside agencies who've come in and provided these services. That is also in there, and those are not inexpensive. And also support for MYP language, and we put some funding in there to make sure that those programs can be robust, and in both of those bottom two, that they can handle the fact that we're planning for that growth at 6th grade. So those are some expensive items, but items that are built into this budget. We also did some things for staff. We've included some professional development, and an important one is the multi-tier systems of support, MTSS, which we applied for and received a grant $50,000 that we are going to begin that program come September. And the good thing about it is the way that grant is set up, it's specific for training that teachers do online, and we're able to use that money to pay our teachers to do that training beyond their hours. We could also pay for substitutes. There's lots of different ways to do it. But I think for us, the best situation is not to have teachers out of the classroom any more than they would need to, but instead doing doing beyond their day and getting paid for that time, and doing it at their own time, because this would be an online piece. We also are planning for training through IB. We're planning for time to work on our German curriculum. We did some good start work on that, especially early over the summer, but we want to get back to that this coming summer, and we want to continue with that next year. And also literacy training that is connected to our Fontes of Pinel program. So those are an important piece that are funded in this budget. We've also increased benefits up to 750. That was from 700 per month. And the reason we made that move, we wanted to do something for staff, but what really has happened is the costs of benefits have creeped up, and we had always tried to make sure we had enough in our benefit package to have someone not have out-of-pocket expense for their own medical benefits. If it was for a two-person or a spouse or a family, that would go into out-of-pocket, but we should be able to cover that. And with the 750, that is the case. So that was an important one we wanted to have in there. We also are included all the STRS and PERS statutory increases to make sure that we are in compliance for all of our employees with regard to retirement benefits. We also included the 2.8 step and column increase that we have traditionally done. And so that is included in this. And we also increased our daily rate for substitutes, trying to do a little catch up there with market levels, and really get something back to the folks who helped us out, who are our in-house substitutes. And so that's something we've included. We also looked at facilities, and this is where we think we are now. I can tell the board we are literally on the goal line of finalizing the alt agreement. So that's very good news. We've already done a local sign off at with Marina Del Rey Middle School, so that has occurred, and we are finalizing with Local District West. So that's very good, which means our budget amounts are very good for what our rent is, or pro rata share is, for those 17 classrooms. Because if you recall, our offer was only for 15 classrooms, plus 2 special ed plus office space. So 17 classrooms is what we really needed to run our program, and it looks like we're headed in that direction. So that one's a good one. The bottom 2 are not so good. You guys are well aware, we signed off on an agreement for over allocation penalties that go back from the years 2016, 2021. We've included that in our budget for our, it's about $8,500 a month, and that would be across the 12 months of this fiscal year. And so that is baked into this budget. We also have put in, and this was discussed and determined at the Finance Committee, that we feel there's a very high likelihood that LAUSD will be giving us an additional over allocation penalty, and we calculated it out conservatively, a conservative estimate at 180,000. And that's because of the enrollment drop of this year. There's certainly much to discuss, and we will do that if we do get that bill, and we will try to mediate and work that through. but we don't have the same legal standing that we did on the other over allocation penalties. So we felt it is prudent to put this into the budget, and that puts our facilities cost at very high this year because of over allocation. But just to give you an idea, as long as we're hitting our enrollment targets, that should not be an ongoing thing where every year we're going to get a penalty. This is the uniqueness of this past year. So, and we'll talk about the two scenarios and where that fits in moving forward. The other piece that is included in this is a different setup with regard to our administrative team and how we're set up. We made an announcement yesterday that Mr. Michelson is moving on to a different position, and it's very exciting for him with the new challenge that lays ahead and kind of a next step on his career ladder. But it also puts things into a bit of a rethinking phase. And so we've been doing that. And what we are proposing and what we built into this budget is that we are going back to the TK8 principal setup. As you know, the material revision that allowed us to have middle grades was not a standalone school. It was a part of a TK through 8th grade school. And so with this, our setup is going to be with a TK through 8 principal, and under that person would be an assistant principal. There is a part of this, and the funding is a piece of it, is that the ED executive director, me, is agreeing to a voluntary reduction in contract to 0.6 of salary. This will allow for some of the funding and a realignment to create a 4th position. And that is at the site level. And that is for a teacher on special assignment, a full-time position outside the classroom that would be for IB coordination, curriculum, and administrative support. So that is a shift and an addition, but there are also cost savings that come within the setup of assistant principal and the setup of a reduction in the ED contract. Of course, we still have our director of operations as a part of this. And so to kind of see how that lines up, we are still with the board of trustees and the executive director right below that, overseeing the principal and the director of operations. On the operations side, we have our admissions and attendance officer, office assistant, and our independent study technician. We've actually added in more time on the independent study technician to help offset some of the time frame that things that will shift from the executive director to director of operations in terms of duties. And so there needs to be some additional time. We are also looking at, it's not in there yet, but under where it says office assistant, there may be a need for a part-time piece to that. And we're actually doing some internal discussions with people to see if that will work. So that may end up in the finalized budget that we'll bring in June. On the other side of the house, under the principal, you can see the assistant principal, the teacher on special assignment, the TOSA, that's the IB and admin support person. There's also a couple of coordinators that we've done that before. There's an EL coordinator, which we would continue. And that's someone who is still working full time, but this is beyond their, they extend their year and they get a stipend for that. And then the same thing, we want to build an MYP coordinator who would be someone watching out specifically for the MYP program and helping with schedules and all the pieces that go into building out the MYP, a support for the principal and a support for the assistant principal and a support for the teacher on special assignment. So that would be what the coordinators are doing. And then also, of course, the teaching staff. And then as we have traditionally done beneath the assistant principal, the instructional assistants and behavioral intervention specialists would be under their purview and direction. So that's what we envision for our organizational chart. And a couple of things as we dive into the budget itself. The additional ongoing funding that I mentioned at the beginning, this was in the May revision, but it is not yet cleared through school services and therefore in XED's model to show in the budget. We expect there to be something in the neighborhood of $100,000 that comes in ongoing funding. And why is this important that it's ongoing funding? Because this could be used to increase our salary scale. And that's something I'm really encouraging our board to find a way that we can make that happen. And so this is the money we want to watch very closely with regard to ongoing funding, because that means we can fund it and know that we can fund it this year and next year and beyond. So this is an important piece that we don't know the dollar amount yet, and therefore it's not put into the budget. So you're going to see budgets that are in the red for next year, but remember that there's ongoing funding here. And then the second thing that's down here is additional one-time money. And this is even more significant. Unfortunately, it's one-time money. Therefore, it has more limited uses. But we think there could be anywhere from 200,000 to over 500,000 if our enrollment comes in, and it's actually that $1,300 per ADA. And what's important about this is it could close any funding gap that might exist in the budget we're looking at now. But most importantly, I think this could be looked at as a way to pay off certainly the overallocation penalties that could be incurred in this coming year and from past year penalties, but maybe even paying off in whole the past year penalties, so that's an era that's behind us. So we'll see how much money comes in on this, and then we'll be able to figure it out from there. So our next steps. Tonight, we're going to review our current budget models, and we've created two of them, and I'll talk about each, but a recommended and a worst case scenario. From that point, when we've looked at those and discussed where we think we stand, we're going to be monitoring what's happening at the legislative level in Sacramento during the end of May and June, and monitoring what budget formulas are cleared through school services and then entered into our macros that run our budget projections. And then finally, keeping in mind the LCAP public hearing and budget approval is set for June 23rd at our board meeting. So we will have a public hearing that is for LCAP as required, and do our budget approval, which is required as well. So we will push forward with those next steps. And before we dive into the two scenarios, I thought now would be a good time to stop and ask if there's any questions on what I've just presented.
Thanks, Chris. So let me first go to Frank.
Yeah, so this is really, this is perfect. We haven't had this. This was one of the requests of the finance committee to, to kind of, before we go into budget, map out a roadmap or put a couple of slides together, a couple of talking points. In regards to the org chart, two comments. As you are reorganizing the continuum of tasks, right, or to various positions, can you say, can you outline how many FTEs these are full time? So what I want to know is, and this is what I want to know is, what are the newly created FTE positions, right?
I can answer that really quickly, actually.
Yeah, and then I want to, because I think that the baseline, when we can benchmark it against the baseline of the foreign, and it's my personal opinion, of the older admin staff and everybody else, we were running our admin staff more than at 100% capacity. So I think we were overrunning them at 120 or 130% capacity. But how much room and how much have we normalized the workload by adding some positions here and there? And then at the end of the day, because we said we're going to invest into the program, I want to know what this investment is in dollars and cents. As an absolute, a list of like, we created this position, we created these programs. This is like a list, a comprehensive list of the investment into the program. These were my only two comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Chris, did you want to respond, or should we go to?
I mean, I can just share really quickly. What is new on this chart is the TOSA position, teacher on special assignment, and that person is focused on curriculum and IB and administrative support. The other position that is expanded is the independent study technician, where we added hours. And the other position that was reduced was the executive director from 1.0 to 0.6. And the only change, the only thing that I think we might be bringing on this side is where it says office assistant. That may need to be spread out across two positions, and providing support, like you were saying, where things were running at 120% or 130%. In terms of jobs to be done, but trying to bring those in at some of the lower levels. There also, some of that could be through instructional aid assignments as well. So, and then yes, we can provide something that shows a slide that says investments and with amounts that go along with those.
Great, thanks. Pete?
Yeah, I thought it was a good presentation. I think I'm going to wait until we actually have some numbers up, then I think be able to have some more concrete discussions.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thanks, Pete. Katrin, did you have any questions this time?
Not at this time, same as Pete. I'd like to wait for a little while longer.
And same for myself. I appreciated Frank's questions around the org chart, and I think we're ready to move on to the projections.
Okay. Let me go ahead and pull that up. Right. Oh, that's fine. Oops. Okay, we created two different scenarios, and I'm going to start with scenario 1 and go on to scenario 2. Scenario 1 is what we believe is going to happen. It is the enrollment projections that were set up when we did the lottery, and we felt that those numbers were accurate. It doesn't mean that we are 100% confident we will hit that mark, but we are. It definitely is a reasonable expectation. We also, at the direction of the Finance Committee, took a look and tapered back a little bit in the out years some of the rosier projections on enrollment. So we did adjust some of those. So I'll make this big enough, I hope, for people to see. But we need to start with the assumptions. So this is the enrollment projection of budget scenario 1, which assumes an enrollment level of 430 students. And in looking at that, we stand at 380 right now. That's a big jump when you see the just raw numbers. But keep in mind, we are adding 2 full classes that didn't exist in our setup. We've added, instead of 2 kindergarten, there's three TK students in the current year, along with 2 kindergarten classes. We are planning and have enrollment right now for a full size TK class, so a full 24 students, and also 2 kindergarten classes, which we have projected at 25 students each. So that's a big place where kids are coming in. The other big place where kids are coming in is at 6th grade. And we have polled our families and received a much higher return rate than we did previously. We have also offered to and have enrolled 15 new students for next year along with that. So we are ready to roll into a 6th grade class, two classes that we've put the class size enrollment at 28. So and we built into the grade by grade enrollment projections allowing for a little bit of attrition in the upper elementary, which we've traditionally had. And so we put that in. There's a little bit of attrition that is kind of planned for. And the same thing after 6th grade, you tend to lose 7th graders or lose 8th graders, and it's hard to gain new ones in those later years. That doesn't typically happen. So we had a little bit of attrition in enrollment. So we brought down those numbers a bit for this, for the purposes of planning. But you can see the enrollment across years grows very quickly and would require new facilities or some other type, either a split Prop 39 site or something, because Marina Del Rey Middle School wouldn't be able to handle too far beyond the numbers in 22, 23, 24. Those numbers don't come randomly. They come from rolling forward full classes at grades TK, that we'd have a full TK rolling into kindergarten, which is very helpful. We don't have that this year because we only had 3 TK students. And so that group rolling into kindergarten is what helps us assure a robust kindergarten at that level, and then 2 kindergartens rolling into 1st grade, and so each bumps up from there. And in the same way, at 6th grade, 2 full 6th grades roll into 2 full 7th grades. So that's how those numbers continue to grow. The important thing that we look at beyond the I'm sorry, the beyond the enrollment is our percent of ADA, which is the percentage assumption is 96%, which we've used as our budget assumptions for many, many years in the past. We typically have come in at 97 in normal years. Obviously, this year has been anything but normal. And where we stand under this 3-year scenario, we can see that in the current year, which is the first line, we have a net income of 1769. So that's a break-even budget that we're currently in. We'll see how that plays out. If anything, we think it's going to be a little bit to the better when everything shakes out at the end of the year. But we're expecting a break-even budget for the current year. So next year, right now, we show a deficit of 157,239. That looks like a pretty large deficit, but keep in mind those two big numbers that are not in this yet. So that number of ongoing money, which I see as if we get that, that would be a pass through of trying to improve our salary scale, but significantly the one-time money that covers a large amount of things that we can piece out and keep this budget going, particularly the things that are in there related to overallocation penalties, which would exceed that 157,000 deficit. So even though it's in the red at this juncture, I don't think that is not reason for major concern. If things change or were different as we approach the budget meeting on the 23rd, I would certainly let the board know if something different is happening than what I'm telling you right now. But that I think we're in okay shape with this our suggested or recommended budget. In the out years, and we did taper these down to keep enrollment not as optimal, where we were even putting class sizes at 30 at the middle school level. We brought those down to 28 and I think 26 at the 7th grade level, and went even down beyond that at the 8th grade level. But you can see we have about a $500,000 projected net income, and in the following year, about a $776,000 projected net income. Now, always keep in mind these out years are fraught with unknowns, but even still, it gives us an idea of where we would stand. And we tried to build in as many knowns as possible, but this is set up with the idea of how we're running the school this year with the number of classes, the number of kids we have, looking forward to next year, and then projecting out. So that is projection 1, and in your board amounts, everything below this is the detail of that. So it has the same information here, but it's broken down. Instead of a summary, which we were just looking at, you have a more detailed accounting of that. And that is in your board Dropbox folders to scrutinize as you will. We won't go dive in. Well, you can look at anything you like, but I'm not going to go line by line on this. But that essentially sets out for us what scenario 1 would be. Let me show you scenario 2, and then we can open it up for discussion. Scenario 2.
Chris, Ryan is in the meeting now in case you wanted to include him.
Thank you. Hi, Ryan.
Hello, everyone.
Ryan, let me have you chime in at the end when I'm going to finish on scenario 2 and then open it up to kind of chime in on thoughts. So this is the second scenario. This is the one that is like, what if we don't get enough kids? So instead of 430 kids, what if, and this was a number given to us, and we went back and did the enrollment, trying to kind of shoot for this, and we hit it right on the number, which was, what if only 400 kids come, even with 2 additional classes? And so we went through and looked at where we stand with our classes now and who's in the lottery now, and we made enrollment projections that brought everything down to what we considered kind of worst case scenario, and brought that number down to 400, and built out from there what would be the next year, which the growth when those classes roll forward would only be 435. And the following year, when all those classes roll forward, the growth would be 478. So that's what the assumptions are in this, but 400 less students is extremely significant. We brought middle school, for instance, 6th grade, down to the lowest spot you would have and still have 2 classes. And so the number, that's where the enrollments came down. And to give you an idea of where that would be, the net income now would be 453,238 to the negative. So that would be a huge amount. It still might be covered if all of the money came in that still is on the table. But that's a pretty staggering number at this point. And you can see in the out years, there is not anywhere near the kind of savings or net income that would happen in the out years, 59,822, and the following year 54,608. And so just to put these 2 out here for your discussion, Ryan, is there anything you want to add for the board before they have a chance to chat?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thanks. All right, Sam.
Thanks, Chris. So let's start off some questions. I'll turn to Frank first.
So comments. So again, I'm going back, so my perspective again, I'm as the finance chair is, I'm looking at investment into the program, right? And the way you do investment into the programs, which you need to spend some money in order to recoup, in order to get some benefits at the end. The way this is done in finance, at least when I went to school, is to determine the net present value of the investment. And so of the period which you're observing. So for me, it's always the case, I'm looking at the aggregate numbers. My perspective is over 3 years. I understand that the model has lots of uncertainty in there, but at least we're making the mistake the same over the years. So for me, it's about the aggregated surplus over the 3 years. I'm willing to spend some money this year in order to attract more talent. On the teacher side, to retain talent, and also to attract more students in order to get the enrollment up. What I wanted to know from you as a finance chair is, going back to my initial comment, is how much is your personal risk tolerance? How much are you willing to lose in the first year? Are you willing to lose $500,000, $250,000? Do you don't want to lose anything? So that's what I want to know. I think needs to be at one point in time, we need to decide. So that's the one comment I want to make in regard to my perspective. The other comment is a question, or it's like, maybe what we should have in order to make better decisions also is to get an enrollment underachieving charts. So saying, these are the numbers of students we have planned for. These how many have showed up. So we look back into the past and said, oh, we have budgeted for 420, 380 showed up. We have planned for 440, 320 showed up, whatever the numbers are, so that we can get a feel of what the worst case scenarios are or what the worst case scenarios were in the past and where which we thought where we're going to be. So looking at actually planned versus actual or actual versus planned to give us a ratio of what the likely scenario is, what the outcome is, which may help us then to determine what our risk appetite is. In a perfect world, you do a Monte Carlo simulation, right? Where you just model all the potential outcomes. You do a random pick of numbers and you model the outcomes, and that gives you a likelihoods of exceeding or exceeding likabilities, right? So these are my 2 comments. Wanted to know what your risk tolerance is, what my perspective is, and that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Pete?
All right. Well, I have a few comments, and I didn't have enough time to get them in a really good order, but let me kind of piggyback on what Frank was saying in terms of risk tolerance. So I certainly believe, I certainly agree that you need to make some investments in order to grow a program. There's no doubt about that. And so I have some tolerance for the risk there. However, and I think this is a fairly big however, the way these budgets are kind of presented as a false dichotomy. It's either going to be this or it's going to be that. And my general thought before getting into some of the details is that if enrollment meets projections at 430, then potentially, and again, we'll get into details in a second, then potentially that budget and the things that have been planned out might be fine. But I don't think you can go business as usual if you miss your projection by that much. There has to be some mechanism by which you say, well, if we're going to miss our student projection by almost 10%, then what else are we not going to do? We can't do the same thing. I mean, that just seems illogical. And that's when you need to start thinking about, well, then perhaps we have fewer teaching assistants or instructional aides or things that correspond, because you don't need an instructional aid for every 3 students that are in the school. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but there is a number at which that can work, and it doesn't need to be reduced. It doesn't need that ratio doesn't need to go down and have the same cost. So I think there are some elements to this budget that should change along with their enrollment projection, and not just, well, we're going to spend the same thing and we're going to have a bigger deficit, because that's not really budgeting. That's just saying, that's throwing up your hands. So I don't agree with the way that part of it was presented. The other thing about the enrollment projections, I agree we should look to see what enrollment projections have been in the past and how close we've come to meeting them. And while I don't know specifically, because and perhaps I should be a numbers person, I should have kept closer track of this, but for all the years I've been in the board, we've never met our numbers projections. And the 430 seems reasonable given a real shift in bringing in new students, which has been Goethe's strong suit in the past, and so that seems somewhat believable. But the out years seem improbable, and I want to say something specifically about that. One, rolling the numbers forward. I know there's a formula for that, and you could figure that out. But it's never happened previously in the time that I've been on the board, and so it seems unlikely to occur again. And secondly, and perhaps more importantly, I think, is a question of why. It seems that every year when we don't get this roll forward into the upper grades, we have some sort of a story about this, that, and the other. And I understand it was a pandemic, but pre-pandemic. And so I think it behooves us to take a hard look at why there is so much attrition. If there is the great love that we claim, we wouldn't expect to see that kind of attrition that we have in the past. And again, I think that requires a hard look by our senior staff as to why it is we have this fall off and that people don't build this sense of community into the future. I mean, we supposedly have a sense of community while people are here, but then they leave. And so I think that's very important, and I think that's not taken into consideration either in terms of calculating the numbers in the out years and figure out why it continues to happen year over year that we have such high attrition as we get into the upper grades. So that's another comment. A small splitting hairs comment is it's very curious that at 435 in this out year, we have I guess it was like a $50,000 surplus, and yet in the current year with a 430 students, there's a $157,000 deficit. It seems unlikely that 5 students would make a $200,000 swing in anything. And so I'm kind of curious how those numbers worked out. So that's a minor detail. So let me get to some of the specifics then that I have some concern about beyond the projections. So you talked about some of the specials like robotics, and that's important to have specials. And I understand that some of those things are expensive, and I believe those are some of the things that are really part of the investment for the future. But particularly in robotics, and it seems like that's, and coding, it seems like that's a fairly specialized special to have. And I would be curious whether parents have been surveyed on the types of specials they'd like to have, and whether that really is one that draws in, either maintains or expands the number of students that come in. Because again, if we're investing in the future, we should be investing in the types of specials that draw people in. And while robotics is kind of cool for a nerdy subset of students, I'm not sure that that's necessarily the one that will appeal to the wider audience that we're trying to appeal to. And if in fact that whatever the cost per student is, perhaps that's not the best place to spend it. Professional development. So we all know, well, at least some of us know, that professional development is iffy at best. It's well-intentioned, generally does not have the impact that we'd like to see it have. I don't think a model of having teachers do it on their own is going to be effective at all, because it's barely effective when it's done in person. So I think if you couple that with the greater expense of paying teachers as opposed to substitute for the time, because teachers are probably more expensive than the substitutes, I think that should be examined again. And I think a better model would be to bring clusters of teachers in so that they not only have in-person training for pre-D, B, that they can work in their teams, and there's both camaraderie and the community and building that professional development, and a little bit of social pressure to actually pay attention and implement some of that professional development, as opposed to I went off and did it on my own. And then C, it's probably cheaper to have substitute teachers cover that time. So that would be something else. I know that's probably not a huge cost saving, but it is at a time when we're considering deficits. I think it's something reasonable to look at. Increasing the salary scale. Well, clearly teachers are the most important aspect of any school, and they should be well compensated. I'm not sure, though, there should be a one-to-one salary pass-through unless there is some output. We wouldn't do this in any business, and certainly in schooling. So we might consider using some of those monies. Perhaps some of those monies are considered for pass-through for salary scale increases. Perhaps some of those are held back for other things that can be done. Again, it's not a ton of money, but all of these little line items begin to add up. My notes are unfortunately, I can't read my own handwriting. So I'm going to stop on those points right there. Thank you. Oh, I had one more. Sorry. One more very important. And this is, I'm asking this again, and I've asked this before, given the importance of enrolling students, have we automated the enrollment process so that when people log in and do this online, that it's more streamlined than it has been in the past? Because I would be very disappointed if that has not been taken care of for this current school year. That's my last comment. Thank you.
Chris, did you want to take those on before we go to Katrin?
I just want to express we are already well underway with the enrollment change, and we're using PowerSchool Enrollment Express, and so that's undergoing currently as we speak. The plan is that to be in place for the beginning of the school year. The other comment, if I can make with regard to the multi-tier system of support, is that although the teachers gain a benefit of being able to augment income a little bit with doing of the online, it is not solely an online piece. In fact, there's an entire training that is required to do, including the follow-ups, and this is all guided through the Orange County Department of Education, and we get a specialist who works specifically with our school. So I do think we'll be able to have an effective use of that $50,000 while still having a benefit to our teachers as well. So just wanted to share that one out.
Thanks, Chris. Katrin?
Thanks, Sam. Obviously, everything hinges on the number of incoming students and the number of students that we are successfully able to retain. So I agree with Pete in that the forecasting needs to be as accurate as possible. So I'm thinking that, yes, if there was a way to leverage data points from before the pandemic, but also maybe understanding the patterns during the pandemic, will definitely help us have a better understanding of where we will land. That said, Chris, I appreciate the better case and sort of worst case approach that you're outlining. I think that's helpful to get a better sense of where we may land budget wise. So yes, I think that going back to sort of forecasting would be helpful. And I don't know, that's a question maybe to Frank and Chris. Have you ever had to do a budget revision sort of throughout the fiscal year in the past?
Yeah, typically a budget
Go ahead,
revision
Bill.
is required if there's a major change from the time we approve our budget. The legislature sometimes and oftentimes is not completed with their process. And if there's some huge difference, it requires a budget revision. But that just depends and varies year to year. Where if it's large enough, you go ahead and kind of reapprove the budget. But typically, we try to live within the budget that we approve in June. We always say it is a living document, so it can change and adjust. But we try to just monitor what those changes are, which Ryan gives us throughout each month on the financials.
Okay,
We-
thank you.
We take down the budgets like in the mid-year sometimes when we make an adjustment and just cut to the baseline. That's all.
For
you know.
instance, if say student numbers look a lot different from what you anticipated, would you then do a budget revision or not?
I think what I'm hearing is 400 we looked at as a worst case scenario, and 430 is where we think we can fill the classes to. If we want to take another swing at this with when we present a budget, now that you've had the kind of, okay, here's where we think is the low end, here's where we think is kind of the high end, is we can adjust that enrollment and bring it down a little bit. Of course, it will get more in the red, but we're expecting more money to come in. So we could even look at bringing that 430 down to maybe a less risky number. But I think it'd be closer to 430 than it would be to 400.
Got it. And then not so much a question, but more of a comment. Something that we do a lot at UCLA Extension when we try to make our budget work out for us is that we play with timing. For instance, if we want to hire for a certain position, but it's kind of looking tight budget wise, then we say, what happens if this position starts 4 months later? What would the numbers look like? What would the numbers look like if we're making an investment not now, but a couple of months later? So we're just trying to sort of move our expenses around a little bit on the time scale so that it's not so much a black and white yes or no decision budget wise, but more of a, okay, when can we afford to do this? So just wanted to sort of bring that up as a discussion point. Have you done that in the past as well, when you really wanted to make an investment, hire for a position, but it was sort of difficult financially?
I think the only way we could think about that is if we really had the enrollment trajectory in the direction we want, then I think you could start kind of hedging your bet. But for the most part, I don't I'm kind of conservative on these fronts. I don't typically recommend doing a partial, because the following year it becomes full and you have to be ready, and there's different things. So kind of fitting that in is generally tough.
Okay. And lastly, just wanted to echo Pete's point about the parent survey on the specialty. I think that's an excellent idea. I think that came out up during our retreat as well, but we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Although I will chime in on that one.
What was that
I
again?
think there's a larger robotics has a bigger fan base than just a few kids. That one does, but I can tell you one that I'd like to figure out a way to make work is music. I think that's what I've heard most from parents.
I would like that.
So I have a couple of questions, and I think, piggybacking on that last point, and I'll take this question first, is, if we have other ideas of the types of specials that might be of interest and that could help us sustain and possibly grow, is there a place, like you raised the issue of music, could we see how that could get built in here to Frank's spirit of investment? And then I have a couple other kind of investment related questions too. The board has really converged around the idea that we think that it's important, not just for the step up in teacher salaries, but to really see what we can do within a budget to give recognition to our teachers and to hopefully have more than just a step up in pay. And from what I took from the presentation earlier, we don't see that level built in here yet into either of these projections, and that's kind of a contingent to build in based on whether that ongoing funding comes into the budget. And if that's the case, I think we might benefit from seeing how we could build in some of that money here, even without making it contingent on that, and see what kind of impact that has on the budget, because I think that's a really important area for investment to make sure that we maintain our strong teacher base. And then the other area, thinking of investment, we have places that we've identified that we need to grow as a school in order to reach these projections that you have here, right? We know that we have things that we have to do with for facilities in order to sustain an enrollment that goes above that 480 that's here from what I heard you say. And so with the changes on the org chart that we were discussing, do we have enough capacity built into those roles, and do we need to increase any other FTE or partial FTE to make sure that we're not just building in capacity for the work, and indeed the 120% at times of work that's been happening already among the admin team, but that we have enough opportunity there in the resources to support us in growing and where we need to go. And then the final question goes back to the enrollment numbers. And I know we asked about this at the last last meeting, and it ties into the sufficiency of that, of the projection here versus the projection 1, projection 2. Are we still on path for lottery acceptances, that it looks like these numbers, this 430 is still a reasonable number to come to now that you've started seeing kind of the path of acceptances or rejections from the lottery offers? Those are my comments for you.
I can definitely say we looked through in both the scenario 1 and scenario 2 at our lottery spots. The place that we're at, we're really strong with our TK size at 24. We have gone through, filled that up, and still have folks on the waiting list. Kindergarten, because we didn't have a TK class that rolled forward, we are enrolled, fully enrolled there, but we have now gone through, we're a little over enrolled there, but we are already through our wait list. So now it's going to be new post-lottery folks that fill any spots that people drop out at this point. So kindergarten is one we're watching closely, but TK looks extremely strong. And 6th grade, we've brought, as you said, already 15 new students in. We've never done that before. And now we just need to confirm that families who have said they are coming are still coming. So we need to look at that. So if there is change between now and when we present the budget in June, we'll put that in here. And when I said 430, if that number drops a little bit, it'll be because of exactly that reason, Sam, because we're looking at it going, oh, I think we need to be more realistic and on this grade level, but it will be a grade by grade determination.
Thanks. For the board members, do we need another round of questions to Chris, or?
No. Yeah, I would like.
Yep.
Yep. Sorry. Do I have you
Go ahead,
assigned
Frank.
this? Yeah. Oh, thank you. I apologize, Pete. So I think what we would need is like a table saying on top of it years, and then we need to have a table. We are in operation 10 years. We have, at one point in time, at the big, maybe planned enrollment, actual enrollment by class, so we can kind of see over time where this is, and then there's a narrative behind it because we anecdotally know what happened, right? So, for example, in the years where there was the board chaos, there was probably a contributing factor that the parents said, no, enough of this nonsense, right? We're not going to do this any longer. Or if there was pandemic, related, so we know and we can normalize it. But it gives us a feel of what the actual history is at any one point in time to kind of give a projection about the classes. And then we can look and compare it and then we can say, okay, if that were to happen on average, this is what that would mean for our enrollment. For our enrollment projection. So I think Ryan has the data for planned enrollment over the years and what actually happened. And maybe we'll take, I don't know which data points, and then we do a little bit of research where the people left, because we know historically. We might have to dig that out in order to get the data to the forefront to make the enrollment projection a little better. Thank you.
Thanks. Pete?
Yeah, I didn't mean to talk before you, Frank. I was just agreeing to having a second round. Yeah, so I agree we should have a little more in-depth thinking about the enrollment projections, because obviously they're very key. But I think the other thing, and I don't know if we need to decide that today or we decide that when we meet in June, or all the board members can mull over it. And it kind of goes back to Frank's question of what your tolerance for risk is. I am still very strong of the opinion that the budget can't be status quo if the enrollment is not status quo. And if the enrollment changes, we need to think about how to reduce the deficit, because while the deficit of 150K or roughly so is probably reasonable, a deficit of 500K is unreasonable and unacceptable. And I understand that there's additional funding that potentially could come in. And if by June we have more information on that, then we can revisit that topic. But I don't think that they should be static in terms of their expenditures. So there needs to be a plan for what reductions would be made if in fact enrollment goes, if it's 10 kids lower, then this kicks in this kind of reduction. If it's 20 kids lower than 430, then it's this kind of reduction. I know there's not a lot of flexibility, but again, I think a little bit can happen that will make it more responsible, especially as we move forward.
Pete, can I just add a comment on that?
Sure.
As we're looking at what do we cut, I'll give an example. For instance, if the numbers didn't come in for 6th grade, say, we would, what would be contingent would be that second class at 6th grade. And so that's one we could definitely plan for, and we would know it with enough time to be able to say, okay, we that wouldn't be the case. But in most cases, it's not something that's simple. It's a few kids in this grade level and a few kids in that grade level and a few in the other, which in the aggregate creates the problem. But you still need to have a teacher for the class, even if that class has dropped to 19 kids. That's the issue that we face. So we would definitely look and I hope I've given that impression that that's what we've been doing all along. If you recall, I inherited the day I came a $400,000 deficit, and we ended the year at a break even because we did exactly that. So we definitely will. I agree with you that you can't just say, oh well, we'll fix it next year. I totally agree with that. But I do. It's so dependent on the specific of what the problem is, of what the solution is to ratchet down that cost.
Oh no, I fully understand it. It's not incremental in the ways that a lot of other businesses run. I understand that, but we also don't want to. And you did do a great job of reducing the deficit, but we don't want to say, oh, remember when you came, you reduced the deficit, and then what happened? Now he's at 500K again. So,
I'm with you.
So, okay, thanks.
Katrin, did you have any other questions or comments?
Thanks, Sam. Not at this point.
Thanks. I actually have a question for my fellow board members, which is, Frank, following along in the spirit of investment and making sure that we're seeing an investment, is there any other direction that we want to pass along, or any other areas that we want to encourage Chris and his team to focus on, not just to show that there is the investment like you discussed, but that we want to see reflected in the budget, that we think would be something that would really kind of help further the school? Do you have any thoughts on that, Frank, Peter, Katrin?
Not at this time.
So I think maybe this is where the survey would be useful to run to see where is the demand, what kind of programs, or what's particularly well liked that could be maybe potentially expanded, or you know, I mean, I think we can certainly you know, we could certainly come up with things, and you know, I could throw out a few things, but whether that actually meets the potential student body that we have now and their needs, I don't think I'm in a place to say that this is what be a great thing to do. You know, I think having a stats program would be fantastic, but that's even more nerdy than the robotics program.
Frank, your hand's back up.
Yeah, sorry. So I was thinking about like program alternatives is, you know, maybe look at other middle competing schools, what do they offer, right? What can we offer? I mean, one of the big things, a robust sports program. How would that look like? Maybe that's an alternative. Or, you know, or kind of like a wellness program, you know, along those lines of IB, you know, teaching social emotional, you know, not only well-being, but also emotional intelligence, you know, how to interact in the you know, digital, all these kind of, you know, digital, you know, I don't know what the technical term is here, but digital education, all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's an alternative to look into other program alternatives.
Thanks. Katrin, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, Frank kind of already mentioned what I was going to mention, which is it's a rather small investment, but a little bit of market research, just really understanding what draws people to the schools within the sort of immediate neighboring areas around our school from where our students are coming, to understand what sort of our unique selling proposition could be. How can we market ourselves as a school? What makes us unique? What makes us desirable over other alternatives in the area?
Thanks. Chris, is there anything else you wanted to make sure that we explored on this point?
No, I think this is part of an ongoing conversation. It's not just about this budget, it's about the future. And so, you know, we'll, you know, I hear a couple of things that I think the board is asking for when we present the final budget in June. One is dig into enrollment, give a little past history on that, and adjust the enrollment level for what we project. So in this case, if we were saying the first scenario being the one we're looking at, it would be probably lower than 430. We will of course be showing every bit of income that is available to us at that time. And we would also show it through ongoing money, if we're able to do a some kind of percent increase for our salary scale, and looking for other creative ways to help you know, support and encourage our staff. I think the other thing that was asked for is kind of what an accounting of what the what are we investing in now, and then what else can we invest in the future. And I think part of that is some pieces that we may need to add, that I think, Sam, you were referring to. Are there some places where we need to augment or provide more support to get the you know, the support system in place, so that we're not running people at 120%. And so I think there's a little bit more work to be done on that front before we get to the finalized piece. But I think we can get those pieces in place and have a budget that, once all is said and done, is going to be at a you know, at least a break-even budget.
Thanks, Chris. So with that, I think you have your direction from us, and let's move on to the next item in the agenda. The next item is new business, next steps and follow-up meeting times. So I'll go back to you, Chris, in terms of next steps on the budget and other items that you need from us.
So we've got two meetings in June, but the first one is our annual meeting. So it's kind of reforming and reshaping as a board, and determining who will be doing president, who will be doing how all that is set up. So there's a series of different things there. We will be confirming a election that's ongoing right now, and but only one candidate in the election, so it seems to be going well. So we'll be confirming that at that June 6th. We will have other items of business on that one as well. And then the focus of June 23rd will be the LCAP public hearing and then the approval. And that's what's coming up.
Thanks, Chris. So at this point, I think we can move on to adjournment. I move to adjourn the meeting at 7:30. Do we take a vote on this?
We do.
All right.
I second it.
Oh, thank you, Frank. All right, Frank,
Aye.
Pete,
Yes.
Katrin,
Yes.
and I also support it. Thank you all for the work. Chris, thanks to you and your team for presenting this so well. It was a really good presentation today.
Thank you, and thanks for stepping in, running the meeting.
No problem. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Aye.
Good
No.
night, everyone. Take care.